Most business owners that create courses start with, "What do I know?" when they should be starting with the question, "What should they be able to do?" I'm Dr. Catrina Mitchum, and I've been designing and redesigning courses online since 2009. And we are going to flip the script on the way most business owners create courses with a concept called backwards design. Most business owners use forward design when they're creating courses. A forward design approach looks something like brain dump everything I know about a topic, organize the knowledge into modules, press record, add some activities at the end, and then hit publish and wish them good luck. This approach causes a lot of the problems I've been talking about for the last few weeks, like clients not changing their behavior, not being able to transfer what they learned in your course to their actual situations, clients not actually getting the change that they were looking for because you started with knowledge and not action. Knowledge doesn't automatically become action, right? Implementation is not automatic. There's also the failure of transferring from the course to actual context that they want to use it in, right? Because it's organized around your expert knowledge structure and not what their learning needs are. We also end up having that separation, right? That separation of knowledge from the actual doing of the things, because we've gone into it with this, okay, here's what I know, and now go try to use it kind of mentality. The course is designed for knowing, and then we kind of retrofit application. We also tend to then organize chunks around knowledge that we think people should have, right? Knowledge topics, instead of by skills that we're trying to have them implement and integrate. And these are all barriers that can be prevented. So we're going to go ahead and use a method that's tried and true and comes out of instructional design. It is called backwards design. And there are basically 3 stages. The first one is identifying the desired results or outcomes or transformation or change or whatever words you want to use there. What is the thing that they can do? This is the doing piece, not the what do I need to teach? What information do they need to have? What will they know? We need to know what will they be able to do. They need to be specific, observable, and applicable actions and behaviors, right? So we are talking action words here. We're not talking they'll be able to understand. No, they'll be able to use in this way, right? This is the behavior change that I talked about a few weeks ago. So these must be action-oriented and not knowledge-oriented. I'm going to go over a few examples. So a bad example would be understand email marketing, right? Knowledge-based. Another bad example would be know how to write emails. Still knowledge-based. A good one might be write and send a 5-email welcome sequence. Action-based. A bad one, learn about course structure. Knowledge-based. A good one might be create a course map showing learning progression. That's action-based. Stage 2 is when we decide, like, what's the proof that they're doing the thing, right? How will they know that they're actually doing it? How will you know that they can actually do it? What does success look like? And this forces you to think about real application and implementation, not just understanding and theoretically they can go do this thing. So this is where you define what doing actually does mean. So, for example, in course creation, that might look like they'll submit a course map that shows the outcomes, the steps, and all of the tasks that go with those steps. For email marketing, it might look like they'll send me the 5-email sequence and the analytics from the first week. For Instagram, it might look like they'll create and post 3 pieces of content using their content pillars. The evidence matters because if you can't define what doing looks like, you can't design for it, right? So if the outcome is vague, then you have a vague course design. Specific evidence means that you have specific integrated chunks. If you want to learn about chunking, I've already done a video on that. And this applies to not just, I've given you very kind of concrete courses, but courses that are also center around more intrinsic things, right? This can apply to that too. It doesn't have to be just around skills based. Okay, and stage 3 of backwards design is planning the minimum knowledge that they need to do the things, right? We still need information to do the things, but only the information that's going to support the actual doing. But now you're not basing it on what do I know? You're basing it on what do they need to know in order to do the thing. So, what does this process actually look like? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do a breakdown for you of what this would look like with two very different types of courses. Example one is going to be a 5 email welcome sequence, right? This is our concrete kind of tactical course. So the final outcome is write and schedule a 5 email welcome sequence. So what you're going to ask yourself is, before I know that that is done, right? What is the step? What is the step right before I know that I've done those things as a learner? That might be scheduling the 5 emails, right? So, what are the tasks then that are connected to scheduling those emails? They might be connect an email platform, upload the sequence, set timings between the emails, activate the sequence, right? I'm not an email marketer, so there's probably things missing, but you get the idea. Okay, so we know the step right before we've hit that outcome. We know the tasks that need to be done. Then the step, you ask yourself, what is the step right before that? Well, the step right before that is write email number 5. Okay, so what are the tasks? What are the things you need to do in order to know, okay, email 5 is done? All right, so I need to identify what email 5 is going to accomplish, right? It's the last one. I need to write a subject line. I need to write an opening. I need to write a body. I need a call to action. And then I need to review and edit. Perfect. What happens, or what is the step right before you move on to writing email 5? You, of course, write email 4. And then what are the tasks, right? So for writing email 4, I need to identify what email 4 is supposed to be doing, right? What's the goal here? I need to write a subject line, an opening, a body, a call to action for email 5, and then review and edit, right? And so we continue to do this pattern for emails 2 and 3 and 2 and 1. And then the step right before we start working on email 1 might be something like understand the welcome sequence structure, right? And so the tasks under there might be things like learn what each email does, identify the arc and journey, map out the 5 purposes, right, for each email. And so as you can see, this is moving backwards from what's that big goal, right, that we have set out for our clients, and outlining not just the steps, but also the individual tasks that are really core to getting those steps done. A lot of people will just stop at the steps. You need to outline what are they doing in order to check that step off the list. And then finally, you're going to go through and say, okay, well, what information do they need to be able to identify the arc and journey in the email sequence, right? Okay, the second example that we're going to go through is managing anxiety. So the final outcome, this, clearly this one is a more personal development, kind of squishier course topic. So the final outcome is using a personalized toolkit to manage anxiety in the moment. So you would ask yourself, if you were designing this course, what is the step right before they have this toolkit and are using it? The step before that might be practicing using the chosen techniques in low stakes moments, right? So then you ask, all right, well, what are the things that they need to do in order to be able to practice chosen techniques in low stakes moments? They need to identify low stakes triggers, right? Use technique A, reflect on what worked. Use technique B, reflect on what worked, right? Going through and having them use and practice techniques in order to decide what works for them. So the step right before they're practicing these techniques and identifying what the triggers are, they might choose 3 techniques that fit their lifestyle. And so then you ask, okay, so in order for them to be able to do the step of choosing 3 techniques that fit their lives, What do they need to be able to do? So they need to review techniques that feel natural. Consider what fits their daily routine. Pick 3 and write them down. Okay, so then the question is, right before they're choosing 3 techniques that fit their lives, what is the step that they're doing or getting done? They're trying techniques, right? You can't choose 3 if you haven't been exposed to any. So, in this case, I would have them try technique 5 and then work backwards from there. So I'm just going to work through one, but you'll get the idea. So if I'm going to say try technique number 5, the tasks, then we ask what are the tasks that will help us know that they have tried technique number 5. So it's going to be, let's say technique number 5 is a grounding method. So this would be learn the actual 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding method. Practice it once or twice. Note how it felt, right? So sometimes this is about keeping reflective journals so we know how things are working. And then you would continue this for techniques 4 and 3 and 2, like all of the techniques that you would want to include. You would break those down into individual steps so they can really get an idea of what they are, how they work, how they feel. Okay, so we're going to pretend like we've gone through each and every technique you want them to try for their anxiety. So right before, the step before they try that first technique, what is it that they need to do? Well, they need to identify their specific anxiety triggers, right? So in order to know what techniques are going to help, they need to know what to look for. So in order to know what their specific anxiety triggers are, what do they have to do? What are the tasks? Maybe the tasks are tracking their anxiety for 3 days, looking for patterns, listing their top 3 triggers, right? Also, not an expert in this. If you are, feel free to add other tasks in the comments. And then the step right before they're identifying their anxiety triggers, what might they have to do first? Are we just jumping in to identification, or is there something that needs to happen first? In my experience in helping people with these kinds of courses, recognizing what anxiety feels like in your body is often a first step before identifying specific triggers. And so if that's your step, how do we know when that step is done? What do clients need to do in order to accomplish that step? So those tasks might look something like noticing physical sensations, identifying where they feel it, naming 3 body signals. And again, just like with the email course, you would go through and identify what knowledge do they need to be able to do this. So what information do they need to be able to name 3 body signals? What information do they need in order to notice physical sensations, right? And that's how you start with doing, and then backfill the knowledge based on what they need to do. So there are some common backwards design mistakes. The first one is creating outcomes that are still knowledge-based. And this is where you start to look for the words that you're using, right? If you start to say things like understand or no as a way to start, then that might be an indicator you need to really look for what those action verbs are. So other ways this might look, so for example, if you find that you've written an outcome that says understand their audience, you might rework that to be define their specific audience. You see how we shift that from information to actual implementation. Mistake number 2 is working backwards but not integrating. And so that is where we identify the action, which is great, right? So the action might be write the email sequence, but then we teach all the email knowledge first without having them actually implement the smaller chunks and pieces. So we still have like this separated kind of experience for learners. So backwards design means that each step that we're taking has everything integrated in order to be able to take the next step. Mistake 3 is related to mistake 1, and that is including a bunch of just in case knowledge, right? We can't always know what people come to us with. And so I get the inclination to try to include more or to make it seem more valuable. But what it actually does is makes it overwhelming. If you want stuff like this in your inbox every 2 weeks, sign up for my newsletter in the description. If you want help validating an idea and getting started on your course, I'm doing a 2-week challenge in a few weeks. Check out the description for that link too. Backwards design tells us what to teach, in what order, how to chunk it, but the thing it's missing is where to start. Not everyone starts from the same place, and this is also what tends to cause mistake number 3. In next week's video, we're going to be talking about when your learners come to you with different skills and abilities and how to make sure you're still designing something that is accessible, that they'll be able to be successful in. If it's not there, it'll be there next week.